Thank you very much. Thank you for calling me. I'm very happy to be here and to participate. Now that you mentioned feminist theology and the importance of nonviolence, it's really important to mention that feminism, whether it's feminist theology or it's secular feminism, is always and inherently connected to nonviolence. To anti-military and to non-violence, and that is to peace building as well. And that is very important to state in the beginning. Before everything, I would like to introduce myself so you know who I am. My name is Lana Bobic, and I'm a theologian, but I have also been working in the field of fighting violence against women for 10 years. I have been working with mostly secular organizations that provide help to women victims of violence. But I also am a theologian, a feminist theologian, and I also see a huge potential that church has in battling violence against women. And so somehow I think my mission, I believe my mission is to build bridges among secular and religious, among civil society organizations and religious organizations in the goal of fighting this, what you will see is not a private, but a social problem that we need to face on all levels in our society if we really want to not only combat it, but prevent it, and to create a society without violence that is so much happening around us. So a question for all of you. I would like to think I would like for you to think about this question. When you go to a Sunday Mass, do you see women around and ask yourselves, is some of these women victim of violence? Because what we know is that 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual partner violence, and most often we're talking about intimate partner or domestic violence. So it's very hard that you have been going to a mass or in your church community and that at least one woman wasn't or is not right now victim of some form of violence. What is also very important to understand, and I will just say it briefly, is that understanding violence as a private problem in relation to understanding violence as a social problem, only through last 70 years, we have been understanding violence against women, intimate partner, and domestic violence as a social problem, not a private problem. Before that, it was treated as a private problem, a problem that is a matter of family, and you really didn't have no institutions, no legal support or legal protection for victims of violence. Today, the situation is different, and we have international documents, a legal framework for elimination of violence against women and discrimination against women, violence against women being a form of discrimination against women. All of these documents, all that we have done in this area, state that violence against women is gender-based and that we need to understand it as gender-based violence. Gender-based violence means that violence is happening against a person because of person's gender or because it disproportionately affects persons of specific gender. Women and girls are most common victims of gender-based violence. And what these documents also state is that violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between women and men, which have led to domination and discrimination against women by men and to the prevention of advancement of more women. Violence against women is one of the crucial social mechanisms that when women are forced in the subordinate position compared to men. When we talk about men who batter, I only have to say one very important thing. I will not be staying on this for long, but violence is too often understood as an isolated incident, as a moment where someone loses his temper, so to say. And violence is not about losing temper. Violence is about gaining control over women. Violence is about control and power. And this is shown through a myth that is a very harmful myth, is that alcohol and drugs are major causes of violence. There are a lot of myths. I will just state this one because it shows. And the truth is that alcohol and drugs may increase violence, but they're not the reason for violence. The reason for violence is the want to control, to exert power and control over another. So it's not about the loss of control, but gaining control over someone. We have different forms of violence against women, but I believe that you all know these basic forms of violence. So I won't be talking about that, but I will tell you that I will say a little bit more about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, because it's important for us in church or churches, because it's very common, it's very spread. And since the church's authority on family and marital relations, it actually considers the church very much. And I will also be talking about structural violence, which is crucial to understand if we want to understand personal, interpersonal violence. Structural or indirect violence does not refer to individual perpetration of violence, but to relations of violence that is incorporated in various social, cultural, and religious norms and institutions. It may be firmly rooted that, that we cannot even recognize this, we don't even see it, but it is so, we are so into this cultural or religious or social patterns that we don't even see it as violence, but it is violence. And it also, it often justificates and excuses different patterns of violence. The extent of structural violence is indicated by the widespread of personal violence. Gender stereotypes, for example, are a form of structural violence, and along with other forms of structural violence, they facilitate personal violence. As I said before, domestic or intimate partner violence is one of the most common forms of violence against women. Everyone can be a victim of violence, no matter gender or any kind of status, but it is, women are disproportionately affected by this form of violence. Here I also put one of the statistical information that is for me devastating. It's the fact that 137 women are killed every day by their partner, their ex-partner, or someone other from their family. Not to be talking too much, I want us to watch something right now. It's a short movie about violence, and I want us to watch it because it perfectly shows the circle of violence. So, this film I wanted to show because I think it shows the cycle of abuse. It shows that abuse never starts with physical violence. There is no relationship that started, no violent relationship started with a fist. It starts with psychological abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, control, different behaviors that first break the victim, and then the physical and sexual violence start. It's never an isolated incident. Violence in a relationship is a continuum. And as you can see here, it's the cycle of abuse with tension building, the incident, the reconciliation, and the calm period. And after a long period of many years of violence in a relationship, the reconciliation period and calm period often disappear, and it's only tension and violence. And as I said before, it's not about the loss of temper, but it's about gaining control. So for a battered woman, will the congregation pastor be a part of the problem or a part of a solution? It's a question that I've picked up from book Religion and Intimate Partner Violence. I will share resources, and they're already shared on the Padlet site. If you're using it, you can already see it there. But it's an important question, especially having in mind that the church needs to help both the victim and the abuser, which is very often a very hard position, and a position where you have to make collaboration with other professionals who can take more specialized, give more specialized help. So if we want to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem, it's crucial to understand violence as gender-based and to understand the dynamics of abuse, because without understanding these things, it is very easy to put the responsibility on the victim, whether it's for the violence or for forgiveness, whether it's asking, how did you provoke this, or what did you do, or asking the victim of violence to forgive when the person is not ready to forgive. And as Marianne Fortune in Forgiveness, the Last Step is writing, forgiveness before justice is cheap grace. It cannot contribute to authentic healing. So we should never be the ones forcing a victim of violence to ask for forgiveness. That is something that has to happen during the process. It is also very easy to oversee the problem of domestic intimate partner violence as a private family matter, not a social problem, which I have told you before. Until 70 years ago, it was seen as a private, not a social problem. And of course, we need it to be understood as a social problem, because if it's not, then the resolution is in the family, and we don't have framework for helping the victim on a legal level, on a level of providing specialized help, psychological, socioeconomical help, and so on. If we don't understand it, it's easy to be manipulated by an abuser, and as Nathan Clark, Fisher, Townsend, Holtman, McMullen in Religion and Intimate Partner Violence say, especially an abuser who is deeply connected to faith tradition. Because if you have a pastoral worker who is not, who doesn't understand these issues, then you will probably have a person who is an abuser, and if abuse happens and you get to know that this is happening, and he will come, for instance, and say, I'm so sorry, I wish it never happened. If she just came back home, I will never do it again. And if you don't understand violence and gender as gender-based and the dynamics of abuse, you will easily believe this. And this is not what will happen. This is never what happens. Actually, if she comes back, the violence will continue. There is no simple solution for this, and there is no quick solution for this. It needs to be a long process of healing for the victim, but also for the abuser. They say that an abusers need at least 2 years to understand that they can actually change their patterns if they can, and they can only if they're really willing to do it. To treat domestic, if we don't understand this, then it's easy to treat domestic or intimate partner violence as an isolated incident and loss of temper, which I have already talked about. And then the solution might be endangering for women and the family, because if you treat it like this, then you will be, it will be much easier for you to say, oh, go back, be together again, and he will try and you will try. And that's actually very endangering for women and for the children in the family, because it's endangering for their life. Also here to say just a little digression, how it's about gaining control over women. Actually, women are in greatest danger of femicide, killing the women, when they leave their partners, when they lose control and they have nothing else to lose, but then the violence really escalates. When we don't understand it, it's very easy to treat domestic intimate partner violence as something that can be fixed relatively quickly. It can. It's a serious, complex issue, it's serious trauma, and it cannot be fixed quickly. It's also easy to treat domestic IP violence as something that can be fixed with better commitment to faith, understanding abuse as man's sign of spiritual immaturity and struggle with sin, or when it comes to women, this wrong interpretation of theology of the cross, the suffering of woman will save the family as suffering of the Christ has saved us. And there was research in Croatia by Adranka Rebeka Anić, and research is also around the world in different kinds of parts of the world have been done where because of this, women, Christian women, are taking more time to leave their abusers, since they have this idea that with staying in the relationship, they're actually the ones who are saving the family. And it's not about the commitment to faith to suffer, just as it's the wrong understanding of theology of cross, the misinterpretation, and it happens, and it's actually very, very bad for the victims of violence, but also for the abusers. And it makes actually, as I said before, Christian women who are victims of violence easier. It's easy. They stay in abusive relations for a longer period of time. It's also, if we don't understand this, it is also easy to oversee the need for high professional specialized services for both victims of violence and the abusers. And this is my personal experience, where I'm having really hard time to build bridges among secular organizations that are mostly feminist organizations and church in Croatia. I'm talking about Roman Catholic Church, which is dominant in Croatia. And there is this antagonism between them. And if we really want to help victims of violence, we should actually build bridges, because secular organizations have know-how in response to helping the victim of violence. They are the ones who have shelters, the SOS lines, free counseling, whether it's legal counseling or psychological counseling. And the religion, the church, has this huge power where the church is often the one who is the first contact for the victim of violence, who is often someone who is seen as authority when it comes to family matters, when it comes to marital relation matters. And women who are in secular shelters often have this feeling that their need for spirituality, their need for their faith is not heard in those organizations. But on the other hand, in the religious spaces, the response to family violence is not as specialized as it should be. And the most, as I see, the most dangerous thing is keeping marriages and families together in front of safety and lives of women. So in this idea that families should be held together under any circumstances, women are led to stay in abusive relationships. And this is something that is very dangerous and that is happening more common than we think. Even if even if the pastoral worker doesn't say stay in an abusive relationship to a woman to save the family, this is actually the narrative that has been dominant. And this is the ideas that have actually been very dominant. The patriarchal understanding of family is still very, very much present, and patriarchal understanding of family is actually a form of structural violence. What am I actually talking about? Patriarchal societies consider the most important role of woman to be that of a wife and a mother. We also, there is this idea that it is an ontological purpose for woman to be a mother, if not physically, then spiritual in a way. There is deeply rooted idea that the marriage must be preserved at all costs for the sake of preventing the family, and the stigma of being a divorced woman is associated with the assumption that she is the one responsible for the divorce. Although our societies have changed in that matter, this is the still dominant paradigm, if not in our conscience, then in our subconscious, to say it in that matter. And here are some important quotations that I find that really go to the point. Seeds of intimate partner violence lie in the subordination of females to males, subjecting women as wives to male authority and control. These intimate relationships have been institutionalized in the structure of patriarchal family. As long as theological traditions cling to submission as a theory of choice for male-female marshaled relationship, abuse will inevitably continue as the practice. The belief that keeping marriages together is of primary importance and that empowering women to make informed choices on their own might threaten the stability of family, responsibility for the solution of such relationships is on women instead of addressing male violence as responsible is what is happening. We need to address male violence and not the responsibility of women to be the ones who are responsible for the wholeness of the family. And what we need to understand is that when women leave a violent relationship, it is not the act that destroys marriage and family. The act of a violence is the act that destroys marriage and family. And leaving this kind of relationship is only the consequences of destroying marriage and family. And if we think about, this is something to think about, I just want to leave it as an idea, but we are seeing adultery as a more valid reason for separation than violence. And I think that this is something that we should really deeply think about. When I talk about this patriarchal understanding of family, where do they come from? They come from different models of gender relations. Subordination, which is an unequal model of a gender relations, when men are understood as complete human beings, they're reasonable, they're active, they're the one who should be in public space because they're reasonable, they're active, they're all these things, so they should be fulfilled in public sphere. And women are understood as emotional, even hysterical, passive. They exist for men and they're fulfilled in private sphere. And they're incomplete human beings. They can become complete only in relation to men. These ideas about how women and men are, they actually don't come from Christianity. They come from a scholastic misunderstanding of Aristotle. But today I will not be talking about that. I will just talk about these models of gender relations a bit more. But these were actually philosophical and then later theological ideas that were very misogynist in their core, and that have became dominant ideas about men and women. Then we have complementary gender relation, which is the one that is dominant in Christianity today. And the idea is that women and men are equal in dignity, value, essence, human nature, but that they have different roles, since man is the one who is authority and women is the one who is submissive. Man is reasonable, active. For man, love is a part of life. He can be complete human being only in a relationship with woman. woman is emotional, passive. Love for her is her whole life, and she can be complete human being only in relationship with man. Then we have egalitarian model, where men and women are equals. Men and women can both be sensible and emotional, active and passive, complete human beings as individuals. And men and women do not complement each other through different natures, but they are free to do it as persons, two complete equals in a partnership. And this is the model that as feminist theologian, I think we should go for. As you can see here as well, the differences between the subordination and complementary model in relation to egalitarian model is that in subordination and complementary models, differences between men and women are biological and as such fixed. Biological differences result in psychological and spiritual differences and in different social roles. Such stereotyping of gender roles clearly prevents the achievements of equality between men and women. In egalitarian model, the differences attributed to men and women are not perceived as purely biological, but as largely shaped by society, culture, social process, and upbringing. So, combating violence against women is about challenging traditions and changing attitudes. Changing this complementary idea of partnership and coming to this equality, egalitarian model of gender roles. And this is what I have come to conclusion when I was working in this organization who providing help to victims of violence is only putting bandages on the wounds. If we want to change, if we want to really combat violence, to eradicate it from our societies, we need the challenge to change our attitudes. And this is where feminist theology actually steps in, because the feminist theology is about challenging patriarchal structures of power. Feminist theology reveals and deconstructs layers of patriarchy, androcentism, misogyny from religious tradition, reveals, deconstructs, and challenges structures of domination and subordination, and actually what violence is, it's the dynamics of domination and subordinations, to having control over someone. And to, of course, cite Elisabeth Schlusser-Fiorenza, feminist theology and gender as a critical analysis in religion have caused a paradigm shift in the study and view of religious texts, traditions, and communities. Feminist theology caused a paradigm shift in the study and view of religious texts, traditions, and communities. It influenced the transcendence of God as man, relativized the connection of men with the divine and the transcendental, and women with the immanent and pure, but so far failed to influence too much the male hierarchical church structures. I would say not only church structures, but hierarchical structures as such, that sustain them with universalist and sensationalist claims of masculinity and feminine content. So for me, feminist theology is liberating the biblical message as a message of radical equality. And we often use Galatians 3:28 as a hermeneutical key for understanding this message and for understanding the gospel through this hermeneutical key. And this is what is the key idea. The radical equality is not only something that is preached, so to say, by feminism, it is also something that we can find in the gospel. And also what Schlusser-Fiorenza in her book In Memory of Her did say, and I do agree with this, that practice of equal followership of slaves and masters, men and women, Jews and Gentiles, Romans and barbars, rich and poor, young and old, was brought in the first Christian community. And it was intense relations with the socio-political environment, which was patriarchal. And this tension that was created by alternative Christian vision in Galatians 3:28 became convenient for induction of Greco-Roman patriarchal order in the house church. And this is how we understand then all this androcentric, sometimes even misogynistic, to read them that well, layers on our traditional interpretations. And as she also says, the reason for an equal position of women, the primacy of complementary gender relation model for the position of women to be equal worthy but without equal rights, is in the way in which the church was institutionalized and hierarchically structured within patriarchal society. So what I want to say is that the gospel gives me this belief that it's about radical equality of all people, not just men and women, of all people. But where we lack radical equality is when we understand, we have to understand that Christianity was born in certain context that was actually patriarchal, and it could have not escaped it. But that nevertheless doesn't mean that we don't have to go back and remember it all again. So this is how people often ask me, how come that you're a feminist and that you're a theologian and that you're a believer? And actually my response lies in this, that both feminism and Christianity are about radical equality among all people, men, women, but also slaves, masters, everybody. Thank you very much.